This is a test of the Boundary Park alert system.
Hello and welcome to the Boundary Park Alert System podcast. This is our penultimate episode of the season. There is no Matt Dean today, but fear not, we've got guests aplenty. I am joined this morning by my guest co-host who's stepping in, my good friend Mike Keegan. Good morning, Mike, to you. Good morning, how are you?
Yeah. All right, I suppose. Be on a Sunday morning.
Yeah, let's kick off with that straight away. So you are currently on a different time zone to us, as one of the country's premier sports journalists. What is it that you're doing at the moment? You want to tell everyone?
I am in Augusta, where it's 28 and sunny, covering the Masters.
Fantastic! That's what a great career and job choice. Yeah, you've made. How is it out there? Is it enjoyable?
Yeah, we have a habit of sometimes you may say, well, what a great job you've got. You don't work for a living, rah rah rah, and you play it down, and it's like, no, it's difficult. It's pretty stressful. This is a great week. There's no getting away from it. It's an absolute highlight. Just the way you get treated. The media facility is like nothing you've ever seen. There's a restaurant in there where you order off a menu. And then obviously you're at Augusta and it's, the place itself is just unbelievable. A little bit weird in that everything's manicured and everything's perfect. But if you like golf, and I'm minded probably a lot of people who are listening to this don't, but if you do like golf, it's like Disney World for golf fans.
Great description. Yeah. Well, we might come back to the Masters, and you can give us an interesting anecdote from your. When did you get there? You got there back end of last week, presumably. Been there a few days. Yeah.
Yeah, last Sunday. So I've been here today.
Lovely. So maybe you can rack your brain in the next half hour or so, and you can tell us a bit of a story about things that are going on out there. But we have, of course, our standard fan guest on this week, and we'll go through the ritual. I think actually this might be our fan guest's second appearance. I think he appeared on a very, very early episode. With Matt in the first season. So it's been a while, but we'll go through the questions. When was your first game, fan guest?
It was a 1-1 draw with Wolves in 1990 when Roger Palmer scored.
Oh, is that the? I think that's the game that effectively ended us being able to reach the playoffs. Oh, there's a hell of a bit of symmetry here, isn't there? There's a bit of symmetry to this. Yeah, I remember that. Is that when Paul Warhurst should have belted the ball into about row K and he tried to take someone on, lost it, and they equalised? I'm pretty sure that's what that game was. In fact, I took penalties at half time in that game for junior Latics. True story. Who's your first favourite player?
It was Roger Palmer because he scored in that game.
My favourite player too. Yeah. It's always one of a handful if you come from that era. We get a lot of people on the podcast from that era. Yeah. What's your favourite Latics related memory?
So it's a tough one, isn't it? Because there's not been an awful lot in the last few years. I reckon it probably is the Fulham game, I think. 2-1 in the FA Cup. Just because I wasn't at a lot of the big games in the early 90s. I went to the replay in the FA Cup semi-final when we lost 4-1. But I was actually on a flight when we had the 1-1 draw. So I got off the plane and someone said it's finished 1-1, and I thought that's not bad. And then I, got the details and found out how it happened and obviously revised my position. But my family were Wolves fans, so they wouldn't take me to the big Oldham games. And in fact, that's when my first game was a Wolves game because Wolves were playing us. So we got to go along.
And the final intro question is, can you tell us a little unknown fact about yourself?
I guess I've been the writer of the detail in the Matchday programme for the last couple of years, which I don't think necessarily gets much attention, but it's kind of quite fun every week or two. I write a little piece about Latics history, obscure, ridiculously obscure Latics history at times, with a bit of stats, a bit of detail, and it goes into the program each week.
Yeah, that's definitely a little unknown fact. Do you want to introduce yourself then, fan guest? Who are you?
Okay, so my name's James Reid. I've been a fan since, basically since about 89, 90. I live down in Didcot. I'm in Reading today because I've just finished running the Reading Half Marathon, and so I'm a member of Oasis, and so we were obviously at the game yesterday. I live in Didcot, but I spent 10 years living in Oxford, so I know Oxford really well. I'd have preferred the local game to have been Oxford United, of course, but we're not where we should be at the moment, so it's Oxford City instead. And in fact, one of my first proper away games I remember going on my own was in '96 when we played Oxford United away and lost 3-1 when we were about to get relegated to League One at the time. And when we lost 3-1, but I went down there on the train from Oldham and got there and thought, this looks like quite a nice place, doesn't it? I walked from the station through the ground, the old manor ground at Oxford United, and my parents thought, that's a great idea. Yeah, see if you can get there. Didn't quite get there straight away. I did a degree in Durham first of all, but then I got down there and then spent 10 years living there, 10 years living in Didcot, which is basically trying to get to games at Swindon, or at least was. National League's not bad for being in the south, given there's so many Southern leisure centres down here. But yeah, that's basically me. Fan for now, I guess 30 plus years. I'm kind of wary of inflicting a little Oldham on my kids because I'm aware of how much they've suffered from on a Saturday afternoon when I've been pissed off. Sorry, probably shouldn't use bad language when I've been annoyed with
you're fine.
with how Oldham are doing, and these are 11 individuals who you've got no idea who they are really. If you might recognize them in the street, but you don't really know them, and yet they affect your mood for the whole day, and the kids suffer. So I'm kind of almost a little bit reluctant to inflict suffering on them for the rest of their lives. So I'm kind of trying to allow them to choose who their team will be. But my daughter so far seems quite keen on Latics, so she may be in for a lifetime of suffering as well.
Well, I mean, I think that's very, very, very fair of you and considerate. I'm inflicting my kids on it, and it's a dictat. There is no alternative. That's who you support. End of story. Not arguing. Professor James Reid. Actually, I think it's probably to give you your full title. Actually,
you're right. Yeah.
Welcome to the podcast. So obviously, Mike, you didn't go to the game yesterday. Thankfully for you, you're enjoying sunnier climes. James, you and I were there yesterday. What did you make of the efforts at Oxford City yesterday?
They're on the beach, aren't they? You just watch them, and there's just not the level of effort, commitment to the cause that you'd expect, that any fan would expect. There's obviously there's ability, there are a collection of players, but you just felt that they're already. I mean, it was a sunny day. Obviously not as warm as Augusta, but it was reasonably nice yesterday. But you just felt like the players just didn't seem to really care to be there. So it was kind of lackadaisical. It was languid. There wasn't really much impetus. There was a few attacks, but nothing like what it ought to have been really. And Oxford City were. They weren't particularly. You could see why they're adrift at the bottom of the table. They were really poor. Yet in the second half, we went into that mode of just hoofing the ball forward, and they dominated the game for a good 20, 30 minutes, which is ridiculous given how poor they actually were. So overall, it wasn't. I guess it was what the scoreline looked like at the end of the day. It was a 0-0 game. It had 0-0 written all over it. There was just very little likelihood that either team was going to put the ball in the net, it seemed.
Yeah, no, I agree. There was very little really to come out of it. There's a lack of spirit amongst them. Like you say, there's some individuals could play. Like Dan Gardner was trying. I think my summary is the same as the previous quite a few games. Is they tried, but they just didn't have any quality. It could have gone on for days and days, and neither team would have scored particularly. You're right, Oxford were a very poor team, and we just didn't create anything. Dan Gardner tried; he huffed and puffed a bit. He tried a few little moves. He tried to sort of look for some passes, but there was very little movement in front of him. It was very slow paced as usual, and we eventually did. We tried to pass the ball in the first half, I thought, but very quickly reverted to the hoofball type, which doesn't really work. When you've got a combination of Andrew Dallas, James Norwood, and Joe Garner up front, because they're not Mike Fondop, who probably is your only outlet if you're going to play that style. So it was a really poor performance, and then it's just, I guess what. Everybody knew that Barnet were 2-0 up at half time against Halifax. Obviously, the Aldershot came in the evening, and they got absolutely walloped 3-0 at home off Boreham Wood. So the opportunity was there again to have taken 3 points at bottom of the league, and we'd have still been in the mix. I mean, technically, we're mathematically still not out of it, but actually, with Southend now are in front of us because their goal difference is so much better than ours. You'd imagine they'll beat Rochdale at home last game of the season. To be honest with you, I really hoped Southend get in there for them and their fans. And actually, I fancied that they'd be the tougher test next season that we could do with them going up. So, absolutely, blown it. Did you catch any of the post-match chat, Mike? Have you caught up on any of it, or has it passed you by? Thankfully for you.
Came on in the media centre.
You didn't.
Merriman, among some of my colleagues. There's some German guys sat next to me, and they were like looking at the ground. What division is this? I held up my hand. It's like 5. Like, and you watching TV? And then there were just various, moans of. Well, I can't swear, can I? But you can imagine that.
You can if you want.
FFS was quite a time. Yeah, not good. Just as you said, mate, more of the same, more of what we've seen. It felt like a friendly game. I actually thought, although we started well, I thought there were times in the Rochdale game that I thought this is like watching a pre-season friendly. Just no urgency. It's like you said, like it, for a long time. I thought, obviously under the previous manager, that the manager was the issue, and that we had a team that was better than what it was showing. I'm not sure I believe that now, because whenever we try and create anything, I've never seen a team give the ball away as much. And I get why it's probably a bit too defensive for people's liking, because it seems on the rare occasions that we do attack, the other team just go through our midfield like a knife through butter. It's like 2 passes and behind us. Like I've literally never seen anything like it. And it's pretty depressing.
Yeah, it was a couple of occasions yesterday where they would pick the ball up on the edge of their own 18-yard box and advance 30 yards unopposed into gaping holes through the centre of midfield. Yeah, it's incredibly strange. It's a fair point you raise, Mike. The thing that has me scratching my head is Mickey Mellon got a tune out of this cohort of players for a little while and got us into the playoff positions. What possibly has changed? Why has it changed? Can we put our finger on that? Can we theorise on what that might be? Mike, have you got anything that you might add to that? What has happened?
Coming out of the Barnet game when Conlon made his debut.
Yeah.
And it's probably the first time in about 25 years that I'd been confident about that this might be a season of achievement. And I was very close to booking my hotel at Wembley coming out of that. And I just thought, at last, we've got a proper manager. This new player that he signed looks like the missing link, what we needed. And we've just turned over one of our rivals pretty comfortably. But then I suppose in football, it's all about timing and about momentum and about how you finish the season. That's, this is now the most important part of the year. Not so much in our case, which means what makes it even harder. But this is when, business end of the season, when you need your players to put your performances in. This is when the pressure's on. And I think it speaks perhaps about the mentality and the fragility of some of the group that this has happened. I think Mickey said yesterday, he takes his share of the responsibility for it. But it's hard because it's been that bad for so long to keep saying it. But, we are off the field in a great place. And I just thought as well, when we scored the first goal against Rochdale and the atmosphere was great, and I just thought it's still there, this desperation for success is still there. And when it comes, it'll be amazing. So hopefully this is the summer where it gets sorted out and next season doesn't look like this one.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I actually sat next to Frank yesterday. I think he was with his grandkids. I had my 2 kids with me. I didn't have a chance to chat to him. He was looking after his grandkids. I didn't want to mither him. But I felt for him because he looked, dejected with it as well and disappointed with it. And the thing that you obviously feel is we've spoken to, obviously the accounts have been published for 22-23 very recently. We spoke to the foundation about their sort of take on that. Welcome to the Boundary Park Alert System podcast episode about finance. I have from the OASF, I have Paul Whitehead. I should say that's not the Paul Whitehead that was involved in the OEC and the FLG, just for clarity, the other one. And I have Maurice Scott. Welcome to the pod, gentlemen.
Hello. Hi, Eddie.
So, do you want to tell us what you guys have been? I mean, you could tell us maybe some of the things that the foundation have been up to, but in relation to finance, obviously the club have recently published accounts for various companies that sit within the holding group structure. But do you want to give us an update of what you chaps have been up to?
Yeah, we've been talking to Darren Royal in particular about getting a bit more information on the finances of the club and a bit more transparency than has previously been the case. At Company's House, you just get a balance sheet, which isn't for a small and medium-sized company that doesn't really tell you an awful lot of the performance of the business. And so it's really to try and ask the club to be a bit more transparent. And to be fair, they're absolutely on board with that theme. And we have had a meeting with them and gone through the more detailed accounts to those that were published a couple of weeks ago on Company's House. We're doing a report on that in conjunction with the club, just to be that bit more transparent and maybe give the supporters a bit more insight into the costs and financial challenges of running a football club that's probably well aired in the Premiership, but not so much aired at National League level.
Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, if you follow people like Kieran Maguire, The Price of Football, he reviews different clubs' accounts. I think I saw him review some National League accounts recently that showed some of the turnover and costs and player costs for some teams that have got out this division, the likes of Wrexham, which were quite eye-watering, some of those numbers. So maybe we might touch upon that if you guys have studied some of those things. But if we just come to the sort of some of the headline numbers. So I'm just going to explain what I think looks like the structure. You correct me if I'm wrong. I should probably say you two guys are finance experts, right?
Could say that, yeah.
Yeah, qualified accountant, if that counts.
It counts more than me because that's not my job. So you're definitely better placed than I to review it. But nonetheless, let me tell you what I think I see, and you correct me where I'm wrong. So Oldham Athletic 2004 Limited is the football club. It produced its accounts for the year 22-23, which were published very recently. And what I could see from within that is that on the balance sheet, we had moved from a position in 22 of around £3.5 million loss to a £5.2 million loss, which, if my sums get me right, is about a £1.7 million loss within the year. Some other bits that I'll pull out from there were cash at bank looked better, over 200 grand in the bank. I guess that helps. Some interesting numbers on debtors and creditors. Debtors increased up to 2 million. But creditors increased up to 7 million, which I found somewhat surprising. But those are the bits that I pulled out. The other thing I noticed as well was we've gone from over 220 to 238 employees, so they employed more people in that year as well. What would you guys pull from that, other than what I've seen?
I think that's right. The cash at bank figure is a plus, but you've got to take into account the whole working capital that surrounds that. Of the creditors, there's about 5.4 million that those accounts show are owing to related companies, which really lead us to there'll be the basically what the Rothwells have put in. Yeah. So basically that the club Oldham Athletic 2004 owes the Rothwells at that point. And remember, we're going back to June 23 now, which was the end of the first year of the Rothwells ownership. So that tells us that they've put in about 5.4 million into the operations of the club. What
would creditors be up to 2 million? Sorry, debtors up to 2 million likely be, do you think?
There was an element of those 700,000 of that was relating to companies that are termed under common control, which it looks as though that majority of that was probably from Oldham Event Centre Limited, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of Oldham Athletic 2004. So
and that's a recent move, isn't it? Which I only see as a good thing, really, to have that as a subsidiary of the football club. Because if we can get the Oldham Event Centre making money, then it contributes to the club funds, doesn't it? So I guess that's a good thing. Yeah.
If you look at Oldham Event Centre itself, accounts, which were also published on Company's House, that leads you to the conclusion that they've lost about $500,000 in the first year of ownership.
It was a 15-month accounting period, I did note, though, because it was extended to be in line with the club. But yeah, it gone from £37,000 in the black to £520,000 in the red.
I think the club are obviously trying to make that a viable business and make that profitable. So I think they may be in a bit of a turnaround situation on that part of the business, particularly.
I noted that the number of full-time employees had increased quite significantly on the Oldham Event Centre. Presume, and the other thing we should note is the Oldham Event Centre includes Glow Gym as well, doesn't it? That's part of that. They've gone from 14 staff to 36 in the Oldham Event Centre. So, like you say, investing now in order to try and realise profit later will hopefully what we'll see. One of the things I wanted to ask as well is there was a charge which was levied against the club as a debenture for £5.1 million in March 2023, which to us at the time looked like the Rothwells making, in effect, open up a credit line to the club should it need it, on the basis that the club didn't really have the ability to get credit from anywhere else because of its previous trading history. That was settled on the 12th of February this year. And you've just mentioned, Maurice, about the fact that the Rothwells have invested $5.4 million. Are those two things related, do you think, or not?
We don't believe they're related, no.
The $5.1 million was only the charge was only registered on the 24th of March 23 from the Rothwells holding company Grocco 502 Limited, but it was settled. I also noted another charge on the 13th of September 23, which was from HSBC. I think you guys issued a note recently from a meeting with Darren Royal where you explained what that was about. It was about BPAS payments. Do you maybe want to explain in a bit more detail what that meant, Paul?
Essentially, clearly, the company needs to make BPAS payments to settle its invoices received and all sorts of other things. And because of the sort of past history of the club under previous ownership, shall we say, the bank sort of required what you might term almost a bond, I guess, to enable that facility to be available. So they weren't willing to offer to the club the ability to make payments in that way, which virtually every business does, without some form of guarantee that we wouldn't default. So basically, we had to stump up some money in order to use facilities that ordinary businesses use as a matter of course, I guess.
It drags on, doesn't it? Would you think that relates to the club not being able to offer fans credit on buying season tickets as well? It's all wrapped up in the same thing.
It is, yeah. I mean, essentially, history counts against you in these things, and our history in that respect. And we're all aware of sort of late payments of wages and all sorts of other things under the previous regime. People notice those things and are then less inclined to offer you facilities.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess my conclusion might be that the charge that was settled on the 12th of February probably was a credit line that was made available to the club so it could trade from the Rothwell's parent company that maybe they didn't need in the end once they got the HSBC BACS payment structure in place. And possibly that's why it's been settled without having any payment going back and forth. I don't know whether any money was used and it's paid back. You can't really tell. But yeah, I guess the headline number of a £1.7 million loss in a year prior to parting ways with David Unsworth and signing the likes of James Norwood probably leads me to believe that the 23-24 might smart a bit more. Obviously, we don't know it. We can't talk about that because we don't know that and won't know that till next year. What are your observations on those numbers? Are they concerning? Are they par for the course? What do you feel about a £1.7 million loss in that particular financial year? Especially, the other point we should make is revenue from the Football League will stop next season, and presumably that was contributing to that budget as well at that time. So, what's the conclusions we should come to? Do you think?
Well, in terms of revenue reducing compared with the EFL going into the year we're looking at, we lost about 900,000 in revenue straight off. We were getting, I think, about 700,000 from the Premier League football TV rights deal, and then we were getting 400,000 from the EFL. The EFL went down to 200,000, so we'd effectively, on relegation, just lost 900,000. And I suppose that they were taking over a business that needs some turnaround. When you get new owners, they always want to do things in a different way, thankfully. And there's always some extra costs associated with that. So on the face of it, it's almost, I suppose, a year or maybe 2 years of turnaround. And we will, going into, we'll have had 2 years of parachute payments from the EFL of 200,000. So that going into next season, we'll lose a further 200,000 that we've had for the last 2 years. And we also lose the academy as well. But looking at those losses compared with some other clubs, they're not surprising. The average loss in that year for the National League clubs as a whole was £1 million. We're a club with a bigger, what you might say, overhead base. We've got a big stadium there, big infrastructure. So when you compare that with somebody like Maidenhead or Dorking, you're talking about a different entity. When you're looking at other clubs' losses in that year, then we've got Wrexham that had an income of 6 million from UK.
Is that income or turnover?
Turnover,
yeah.
6 million, 10 million globally. They lost over 5 million to get promoted.
It's an eye-watering number, isn't it?
And their players' wages were 6.9 million. So they were over 100% of UK income. Now, the National League doesn't have the same salary cap restrictions, or any, I don't think, as the AFL. So given that they've got promotion, it'd be interesting to see how the EFL are dealing with their cost structure against their income. And the EFL Division 2 is probably the most restrictive and well-policed of all the salary cap situations. So that will be an interesting conundrum. And the same goes for Stockport. In the year they got promoted, they lost 4.8 million. So when you're looking at 1.7 in the context of that, you're not surprised, and you'd say, well, it's not too bad.
I mean, you mentioned Kieran Maguire earlier, didn't you? I mean, he described us, when you looked at last year's accounts, as technically insolvent. I think that position hasn't changed, but obviously what we have got is the support of the Rothwell family. I suppose, in a worst case scenario, the problems really come home to roost if and when the Rothwell family decide they can no longer, or are no longer, willing to fund the club to the extent that they have done. Now, hopefully, that won't happen. And next season will be a glorious march to the title. But, if we have another season next season when we don't make the playoffs again, you do have to wonder whether they're going to get a bit cheesed off with it all, don't you?
Yeah, it isn't a bottomless pit, is it? They can't continue to fund those losses every year and in perpetuity. If you recall, when they first came in, there was always talk of seeking outside investment and putting consortia together. So whether that's something that they'll either be keen to do or be forced to do, we'll find out.
In the just prior to the season when Wrexham got promoted, Rob McEnany said that the club is completely, totally and wholly unsustainable if we don't get promoted this year. So you sort of get a sense of the gambles that get taken.
Yeah.
And you really are gambling. And I think Kieran Maguire has said that he thinks we're about 6th in the National League in terms of our losses. Notts County lost 2.8 million when they got promoted, and Chesterfield lost 2.1 when they didn't get promoted.
Yeah.
So you can say that you'd expect losses of 2 million almost.
Yeah, I mean, what have you been able to see from the Chesterfield, Notts County, or Stockport accounts? What was their turnover and sort of player salary to income cost ratio? Like you quoted, Wrexham's being over 100% of UK income. Have you got any of those numbers for those clubs?
No, I've not got the numbers for those. No.
So they've not published them. Not every club does, so you can't access it and see it. I guess the question is, and the question I'm asking myself is, how can what does income and turnover and revenue look like since the Rothwells have come back from supporters? We must have generated more money in season ticket sales, money behind the bar, the fan bar, in the club shop. Hopefully that helps contribute. I mean, we've still made a £1.7 million loss with that, but hopefully more money coming in will help bridge that gap.
I've got a sense that those, if you compare them to the previous year, they've more than doubled, and that you'd see that in the crowds. Really, possibly they're definitely more than doubled. So yeah, that income will have more than doubled. We've not really delved too much into the previous year's accounts. You've got a business there that's declining and up for sale, and owners treat them differently to new owners, and new owners looking to invest and whatever have different plans. So there's not, although there is a headline figure that says it's more than doubled, it's not a very useful comparison really, and possibly the more interesting comparison will come when next year's accounts and we can compare them with year 1 and 2 of the Rothwells.
Yeah, definitely. So in the meetings that you've been having with the club, and you've obviously been given access to the full accounts and you reviewed those, what is your objective in representing supporters with that sort of engagement that you're having? What would you like to see happen? What do you guys want to do?
I think what we're looking for is transparency, really, isn't it? So that fans can get a sense of understanding in relation to the finances of the club, and what the potential issues are if they suddenly stop buying season tickets. I mean, Maurice is right. Crowds have doubled since we got relegated to the National League from League 2, which is remarkable, really. Should those supporters start to disappear again, then clearly that will impact on the club. I mean, I know there's been some debate about season ticket prices, which, to my mind, aren't unreasonable given the state the club's in. It does ultimately at some point have to become self-financing. And the way to do that is obviously to progress through the football leagues and start generating that income that you get from doing that. But in the interim, the supporters need to continue to support the club and spend the money with the club if they want to see a successful season next year. I know, given the outcome of this season, that's quite a difficult thing to swallow because we've not done what we wanted to do. But they need to keep turning up in order for us to achieve the goal of promotion, I suppose. I mean, I look at some other clubs that are arguably of a similar size to us, who are in the Football League, the likes of Exeter City, and the transparency that they include with their accounts. And I know it's different because they are fan-owned, and therefore, transparency perhaps permeates the club a bit more than most other clubs. But, they do produce 30 odd pages of accounts. They're a similar size to us. There's all sorts of metrics in there that fans can look at and understand. And I suppose ultimately that's what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to get the club to be as transparent as that and take the supporters with them on the journey with an understanding of what the position is.
I'm always a big fan of the way Andy Holt engages with supporters. He can be a bit combative at times, but I've always with the best will of the club at heart, I think. And that when you see some of the figures that he produces, it really does paint a picture about how difficult it is for them to trade successfully at League Two level, doesn't it? So it would be great. So do you think there's any chance that we might be able to understand what turnover is, what player to income ratio cost looks like, all that sort of stuff in the future?
I mean, that would be ideal, but I wouldn't necessarily expect we'll get that this time. But I think as the relationship grows and the bond grows between the new owners and the fans, then hopefully that would be ideal. Yeah.
It's a part of a wider debate, really, in football governance as to what information you publish to fans. Because if you just look at a normal private limited company, it's what it says. It's a private company, and the owners and directors generally keep their information private until they get to a size where it's of public interest. But with a football club, you've got a fan base that are buying season tickets, so they're possibly putting in more than the shareholder would put into it over the lifetime than a private limited company, and they're more emotionally invested as a community, and so there is a debate as to what information supporters are entitled to and should get over and above what you would with a normal private company.
I guess one of the other arguments for not sharing everything is you give your competitors a deeper understanding of what you've got to spend. and that can possibly make negotiations with third parties more difficult than they might be if you weren't publishing everything in the public domain. I guess there's one argument for that, right?
You're treading a fine line, really, between releasing commercially sensitive information that might work against you and being open.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, see, for the likes of Andy Holt, it's kind of a zero-sum game. He's just basically saying, "Look at how poor we are." It doesn't really put him that much a difficult position. For us, we might be telegraphing to our competitors trying to get out the National League that what we've got to spend and what money the Rothwells are prepared to stump up each year, and that could make it more difficult. So I guess that's a balance. The only other thing we haven't touched upon is, of course, the other sort of limited company is Brass Bank, isn't it? And that remains. So the other thing I was going to say is Oldham Athletic 2004 Limited, which has OEC as a subsidiary. The parent company of both of those companies is Groco 510 Limited, and Brass Bank is owned by Groco 520 Limited, which are obviously all owned by the Rothwells, so it's all under the same sort of parental group, but they are separate. You will get periodically from time to time one or two people who like to point that out as a negative. I don't necessarily see it as a negative, so long as it's all owned by the same people. I didn't see it as a negative when the Three Amigos owned it. I don't see it as a negative now. But would you guys like to maybe add a bit of colour as to why that it isn't necessarily a problem, or is or isn't, and any particular point of view you want to give?
I don't see it as a particularly big issue. I mean, as you say, they're all ultimately under the same control. It's if they started moving things away from the core ownership of the overall business that might start to become an issue. But yeah, I'm fairly relaxed about it.
It's something you can pick holes in if you want to, but at the end of the day, and a lot of things in business are elements of trust, aren't you? And if you trust the owners and it's all under one umbrella, then there's good reasons to do it. And I think they far outweigh any negative comments that you might be able to poke at it.
Yeah. I mean, for me, the obvious reason to keep them separated is we already know that Oldham Athletic 2004 Limited has, because of its historic trading history, is seen as a bit of a basket case by the banks. If you keep Brass Bank separate, then you can probably leverage money against the asset for future investment, which you couldn't against a football club. And if you coupled them together, it might be more difficult to do so. So that would seem like a sensible reason to keep them separate, which actually does link me back to originally on the podcast. We assumed that the charge raised on the 13th of the 9th, 23 against Oldham Athletic 2004 Limited by HSBC was, because I think it was on the same day, which is coincidental, that the club had announced developments or news on developments to Little Wembley. So we assumed that was a mortgage for that. And actually, in your note, when you had met Darren recently to describe that was for the backs payments, that means that that's something they haven't done yet. But of course, maybe they could do that against Brass Bank, for example. But I think you also included in your note that discussions were still ongoing as to how to raise money for that. So I don't think any decisions have been made. Is that right?
Yeah, as we understand it, there's that hasn't moved on. Certainly, several weeks ago when we met Darren, I don't think that had been resolved. Yeah.
Okay, I think that probably covers it off for now. Do you guys expect to release any more news and updates on the finances at any stage in the near future?
I think we'll be releasing a summary shortly, and I think the club will be also party to add into the figures that are in the public domain and moving us along the road of greater transparency and just putting everybody in the picture and get a better understanding of things.
Yeah, good stuff. Anything to add, Paul?
No, I say we're on the start of the journey. So hopefully, we can progress that, and then the supporters sort of fully understand the financial issues of the club and how they can best help the club deal with that.
Okay, thank you very much for your time and your expertise. And we look forward to maybe seeing a bit more news from you guys over the coming weeks.
Yep,
that's good, Andy. Thanks.
Thanks a lot.
Have a great summer.
Cheers. See you later.
Since we started in 2020, the Boundary Park Alert System podcast has evolved. We were initially a weekly podcast, then we launched the Latics Football Phone-In, our weekly YouTube live stream, and most recently our Saturday morning Look at Latics show on Oldham Community Radio. 3 different shows on 3 different platforms. We also produce a popular weekly blog, manage multiple social media accounts, and host live events. A lot to manage, and it's fair to say we are not simply a fan podcast anymore. We're a multimedia fan channel dedicated to Oldham Athletic. So, from the start of the 24-25 season, we are excited to announce that our home at ofcpodcast.co.uk will become weareoldham.co.uk. Our shows will remain the same, but our output will be delivered under a new brand, We Are Oldham, dedicated fan media. This new structure will help us to manage our output, develop new ideas and grow with your help. Our team is small. You all know Andy, Arlene, Sexy Dave and me, Matt. But we love to bring more of you on board and help us reach as many fans as possible by creating the content that is relevant to them. As well as our new website, we're on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram and Facebook. So there are lots of opportunities for additional short and long form content that we don't have time to produce currently. If you're a content creator, if you want to be a host, a producer, an interviewer, or if you're a graphic designer, design merchandise, you're a writer, a photographer, event organizer, whatever it is, then please get in touch and let us know how you'd like to be involved. There are 2 caveats though. 1, you must be a dedicated Latics fan. And 2, no time wasters. We've worked hard to build up our channel through being reliable and consistent, so you'll need to be the same. Please get in touch via the contact page on our website, ofcpodcast.co.uk, if you'd like to talk about being involved in this exciting new project. We are Oldham, dedicated fan media.
They lost £1.7 million is the headline number, at least, in 22-23. You imagine 23-24 is going to be a bigger deficit with the likes of, the things that have gone on in the following year. We've got a decrease in revenue coming in next year from various sources. They're having to close down the academy because there's no player protection. How long can they stomach losing very significant 7-figure sums every year if we don't sort it out? That's the worry, isn't it? They've done amazing things thus far, but it's a worry. What's your take, James, on the sort of 2 halves of Mellon's reign so far? The first half very good, the second half way below par. What do you put it down to?
My take, and it's not, I would like to be able to say it's more scientifically grounded than this, but it is really just observational, which is we've got too many players who are above 30 and they've all done it before. Right, we got all these guys, and then the thing was said, they won promotion at Stockport, they won promotion here, there, and everywhere. And my take then is that because they've all got that, we've got this age profile that's significantly older than a lot of the other teams. Halifax, Gateshead, really young, keen, desperate, hungry, going for it. And we've got all these guys who, when push comes to shove, they're that bit older. They've got families, they're settling down, they're thinking about what's the next thing. They're not thinking, I really want to get this promotion for Oldham. Yes, they say the right things and so on, and they probably would like it to happen, but when push comes to shove, many more players in their kind of early to mid 20s, and you have to imagine, think that those are the kids, that are really keen to, to make the big steps to win promotion. Like the Gateshead kids are really going for it. So that's kind of my take, is that they've kind of run out of gas, and so they've run out of ideas, and they just don't really look very full of energy in any of the games that we watch them playing.
Yeah, I think it's a fair debate and observation. We're obviously, next week's final pod, we're going to do the squad pod where we go through it all. But in the summer, we did sign some younger players, the likes of Josh Lundstrom and Dan Ward. But, Kurt Willoughby, I think, is probably only about 26-7 as well. But they've all not featured because they've deemed not been good enough. So the recruitment in last summer was an abject failure. In January, Mickey Mellon's tried to put it right, and it's been very much hit and miss also. So, yeah, it really is going to come down to making sure that all of those departments are working in harmony to try and solve that problem. Notwithstanding the fact, I don't know if either of you have listened to Mickey Mellon's interview post-match last night, about 10 minutes of it. His demeanour is getting, I think, shorter and curter with the squad that he's got, on the basis that he clearly doesn't want a lot of them, but he's already warning us that most of them are on the contract for a year, and it ain't going to be that easy. Where do you two gentlemen maybe start with Mike? Has he lost the dressing room with that sort of approach a little bit? Maybe is it difficult to keep everyone motivated if you go with that stance, or is he just telling it as it is and that's the way it is?
I think the timing of it isn't a coincidence, because I think it's something that he could have said for quite a long time now. I think, I don't know about everybody else, but after the Kidderminster game, I just wrote off the season like that we're done. Like, if we can't perform there, then we've no chance. So I've actually been, as you would say, pretty zen about the because I'd come to terms there and accepted it. He obviously can't come out and say those things while there's still technically something to play for. So I don't know if the players are aware that those were his thoughts, but you would imagine that that's been there for quite a while now. I mean, he talks about the Fylde game quite a bit, his second game in charge, and it's like, I knew then that this is a big job. There's a lot to be done. So I don't know is the honest answer to that. But if he has at this stage, if you want to get rid of half of them, then is it the worst thing in the world? Is it going to make much of a difference if they've all fallen out with you? I wouldn't want a manager that looks at that and puts his arm around them and mollycoddles them. They have massively under-delivered this season. I'm amazed that he's managed to keep his patience for this long, let's just say, because he's watching what we watch, and he's in it a lot more than we are. I know we're obviously all lifelong fans, but that cannot have been, because Mickey Mellon, what he is. He's smart, he's honest, and he demands hard work. And I don't think he's seen much of that. I was just going to pick up on your point earlier, talking about the losses and what they'll be for this year. It's pretty stark as well when you listen to Mickey talk about the number of players on 2-year contracts. So, like, having swallowed the 1.7 million, whatever the figure was, and what's come this year, and then it's kind of, you got the impression it's a situation where the owners will be asked to go back to the well. So I can see, that it's just a really difficult situation to be in. But I do think that the manager is the person to get it right.
Well, what do you think, James? Are you happy with Mellon? Are you happy to stick with him?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, for very similar reasons that Mike points out. I get a sense of someone who's got, the values in the right place. He seems like a fairly, thoughtful guy. He's got particular levels of standards.
Tell us a bit about the Masters. Who's going to win it? Well, by the time this podcast goes out, someone will have won it. But who do you think will win it?
Yeah, I was on the 18th green yesterday just to watch the final players come through, and sadly walked off before DeChambeau nailed his shot for about 150 yards. I would say that Morikara is well placed. Keep an eye on him, but it's pretty obvious. I mean, this is going to come out tomorrow, so I'm probably going to look really stupid. He's in the lead. He's the best in the world. Tee to green is as good as anything that we've seen, potentially since Tiger Woods. But yesterday, some of my colleague out here, Riath, is a good lad. He's a Spurs fan, but he's all right apart from that. And he was the problem we've got is that because of the time difference and the traditional print deadlines. So basically, Riath is told first edition at 9 o'clock for your match report. Second edition is 11 or around then. So it's getting to like 10:30 at night at home. It's 5:30 here. Nobody's anywhere near finishing. Yeah. So he writes one version of events, DeChambeau in great nick, and then DeChambeau goes on a run of bogey and holes left, right, and centre, and literally everything he's written is just irrelevant. So it's like hard enough doing a football game because you dread somebody scoring in the last minute, and it's like, oh God, you've got to rip it up and start again, and you're against the clock. But at least there's only 2 football teams. There's like 10 players on the. Do you know what I mean? It's like it could go in any one of. So tonight's going to be fun because that's me doing that tonight. Yeah, that's the only one tough thing about coming here is dealing with that time difference. I'd say Augusta itself, you see it on the telly, and it's amazing. Everything's manicured, everything's perfect, a little bit too perfect. It's a little bit like the Truman Show. When you're out on the course, you've got to put your hand on a visible wall. But then when you get out of the course, Augusta is pretty much like any other place in America. It's strip malls. Part of it's pretty dodgy, to be honest. It is like a place of contradictions. You get, and it's because it's Bible Belt, you get the people walking around with the signs, the repent and all that kind of stuff. There was one the other day, natural disasters are God repaying sin. I was like, oh, that's scary. So you've got that on one side of the road, and then on the other you've got Hooters with John Daly goes to every year to sell his stuff to, punters that are going in Hooters. A certain type of person goes in there, shall we say. So it's a place of contradictions. Or you go into a press conference and you ask questions. You don't have to take your notepad or your laptop in there, because by the time you get back to your desk in the press room, you get an email with a transcript. Someone in there does it for you.
Yeah, out of interest, of all the football that you covered, where would you rank as the best and the worst in the UK for treating journalists in your experience? What's the best experience and probably the worst you've had?
It probably won't surprise you that City is very good. Food is great. Press box is great. You bang on halfway. The old Spurs stadium was brilliant. There's a little bit of this at Villa as well, but at Spurs you were behind pretty much the dugout. So you got
right, yeah,
going on. I'd say, and this isn't a criticism because I like the fans and the club. Goodison Park for somebody who's 6'4" is never a pleasant experience. Yeah, come out there with deep vein thrombosis. And United, because United's in that Bobby Charlton stand, and that can be pretty tight. So at United, I don't tend to go there that often, that more I used to do, but United have got 2 sections. So there's one section that's like for 2, one desk for 2, and you can spread out, it's all right. And then there's like 3 seats together, and they are absolutely tiny. And I used to find that I always used to say, is there any chance I can sit in the 2s? And if I'd written something particularly unhelpful that week, I'd more often than not end up in the middle.
It's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, clubs definitely keep track of what you guys write about them, and I'm sure that they pay you back. Do you ever miss sitting in the press box at Boundary Park when you worked for the MEN covering that? Or
yeah, although I looked up the other day and I noticed that everybody seemed to be sat outside, so I don't know what's going on there. I need to have a word with Roy about that. There used to be, in the bit at the back, the old, the bits with a glass front, and you walk in. There was a heater in there, and I've never known anything give out less heat. Yeah, you were never warm. I think my favourite memory of that was when we played Liverpool in the FA Cup, the big rule in journalism is that you do not celebrate in the press box. Nothing wise. Well, it nearly kicked off at Wembley when the Italian journalists in the Euros final, one of them put an Italy shirt on.
Oh no!
In the press box. But when we played Liverpool, I had to, because I was at the MEN at the time, surrounded by national colleagues, and obviously you want to try and make a good impression. And so I think when the third went in, or it might have been the final whistle, I had to leg it down to the concourse and do a little jig and then leg it back up again.
Fantastic stuff. Right, James is back. Can you hear us, James?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can. Yeah, I think now is the time to put you through the Latics Mind ringer. So we'll give that a go. Are you ready for Latics Mind?
Give it a go.
Who scored Latix's consolation in a 4-1 home defeat against Derby County in January 1987?
Roger Palmer.
It was Ron Futcher. Against which team did Latix play in Joe Royal's last game as his first tenure of manager?
That's really tough. It's going to be a complete guess. We were still in championship. Blimey. Let's say Birmingham.
It was Arsenal in the League Cup. Which Latix coaching legend did we sign as a player from Sheffield United in the summer of 1988?
No, it wasn't Mick Quinn, was it?
Coaching legend.
Pass. Sorry, no idea.
Brilliant. Clyde Weinhard scored 4 against Mansfield in 2002. One was a penalty. Who else converted a spot kick for Latix in the same game?
Who else would have been a penalty taken back then? Chris Porter?
Wayne Andrews. Who was Latix's top scorer in the 1991-92 season?
Got to go with Andy Ritchie.
Graham Sharp. Who scored Latix winner against Blackburn in October 2017?
Pass.
Roger Palmer scored 5 hat-tricks between October 1987 and March 1990. Famously, one of them came at Main Road. I've started, so I'll finish. Famously, one of them came at Main Road versus Man City. Can you name one of the other opponents he scored a hat-trick against during that time?
It's going to be a guess. Bradford.
He scored 1 against Carlisle at home in the League Cup. He scored 1 at Shrewsbury away. We're 2-0 down at half-time, and he scored 3 in the second half, 3-2. 1 against Stoke at home in the league, and 1 against Bournemouth at home in the league.
Abject
so
failure.
He scored... Yeah, abject failure. For a man who's good at obscure stats, I was hoping you might get a couple. Anyway, you got 2 passes. Let's see how Mike gets on with the 2 passes. Which Latix coaching legend did we sign from Sheffield United in the summer of 1988, Mike?
Tony Firskirk.
Correct. Who scored Latix winner against Blackburn in October 2017?
Was he called Duckins Nazen or something like that?
He scored 2 away, didn't he? It was Queensy Maneague.
Oh, Queensy Maneague, yeah, 17 grand a week.
Yeah. Right.
Well, so go easy on James. He's watched Latix yesterday. He's just run a marathon.
I know. Yeah, I know.
I'm fighting my connection as well.
Yeah. Well, as this season comes to sadly a premature close, we'll close out this episode of the podcast. So Anything? Should we end it on a positive?
I can tell you positive. I've obviously people make their own minds up, but I've seen the new kits for next season, and the away kit, in my opinion, is one of the nicest kits that Oldham have ever had.
Nice. That's a good little teaser, isn't it? Are we going to solve our ills over the summer and mount a promotion challenge next season, Mike?
Yes.
James, what do you think?
I think so. We know what their shortcomings are, right? I don't think Mickey and the team are blind to them either. I think recruitment might be different from what it was last year, but I think we know what we need to do, get a more balanced squad, maybe a squad with a few more fighters, and I think we'll be up there.
Here. So thank you, gentlemen. Enjoy your summers. See you in August. Cheers, guys.
Cheers. Thanks very much.
Thank you for listening to the Boundary Park Alert System, a QPod production hosted and produced weekly by Matt Dean, Andy Halliwell and Dave Bradley. QPod is Oldham's only dedicated podcast production company, and if you'd like to learn more about how podcasting can help take your brand to the next level, visit kupod.co.uk. A huge thank you goes to all those people who subscribe to the podcast on Spotify. We really appreciate you all. Please visit oafcpodcast.co.uk and click Be a Supporter or find the link in the show notes if you'd like to help us fund the show. It's only $2.99 per month to subscribe, but if you'd rather make a one-off donation, please visit buymeacoffee.com/OAFC podcast or click the link on our website. Don't miss the Latics Football Phone-In every Wednesday live from 8:30pm. Please visit youtube.com/@OAFC podcast and do hit subscribe while you are there. You can also follow and interact with us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and TikTok @OAFC podcast. Big thanks go to Eileen Finnegan for writing our excellent weekly blog, which we encourage you to read on our website every Saturday morning, and also to Paul Prendergast for providing us with all the Latics Mind questions. The title music for the show is by Manchester DJ and producer Starion, and for more information visit bandcamp.com/Red Laser Records. If you'd like to be a guest or contribute to the show, we would love to hear from you. Until then, see you next time.